Good morning, everybody. How you're doing today? All right, I want to first double check if you can see the PowerPoint presentation on here on your screens. All right, great. All right, so today we are discussing our very last chapter this semester, which will be chapter 13. In chapter 13, we're focusing on the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. If you remember, we divided the nervous system into two major parts anatomically. Those are the central nervous systems that includes the brain, spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system is going to be every single part of the nervous system outside of the CNS. And this includes the nerves that are conducting the sensory impulses and the nerve fibers that are conducting the motor impulses. The first part of the peripheral nervous system is going to be the sensory receptors. And those are specialized to respond to changes that are taking place in the environment. So any change in the environment is what we call a stimulus. So my ability to detect the change that is taking place in the environment, either internal environment or external environment, this is what we call a stimulus. My ability to detect this is going to be carried by the sensory receptors. Sensory receptors are going to be activated by forming graded potential impulses that will be conducted through the nerve fibers. There is a major difference between sensation and perception, and this is something that we've discussed before. If you remember, sensation is your awareness of the presence of a stimulus. So I can detect that there is a change in heat, I can detect the sound, I can detect color. All those are sensations. My awareness of the presence of the change in the environment or stimulus. Perception, on the other hand, is my interpretation of the stimulus. So this stimulus gives me a meaning. So I can hear, for example, the words, this is sensation. But my ability to understand what those words mean, it's the perception of the sensation. And both of them are going to be taking place in the brain. If you remember, in the cerebral cortex, we've got the sensory areas, and those are the brain areas responsible for sensations. But around each of those sensory areas, we've got the association areas, which are responsible for the perception of those sensations. We classify the receptors according to the type of stimulus they are detecting. So receptors which are detecting touch, pressure, vibration, stretch, or itch, we call those are mechanoreceptors. For the receptors detecting changes in the temperature, we call those are my thermoreceptors. They are detecting temperature. And for the receptors responsible to detect light energy, the photons, we call those are my photoreceptors. They are detecting light. A third type, the fourth type on here is the one that would be detecting chemicals, like the ones that we use to detect smell, taste, and the changes in the blood chemistry. We consider those as chemoreceptors. If I'm detecting sensations from a pain-causing stimuli, those are going to be detected by a type of receptors called nociceptors. So again, according to the type of stimulus I'm detecting, we classify the receptors into mechanoreceptors, thermoreceptors, photoreceptors, chemoreceptors, or nociceptors. We also classify the receptors according to their location, either exteroceptors, interoceptors, or proprioceptors. Exteroceptors are detecting the stimuli arising outside of the body: touch, pressure, vibration, temperature. All those are sensations, changes in the external environment that I'm able to detect. So we call those are exteroceptors. Vision, smell, taste, all those are external sensations. Compared to the interoceptors or visceroceptors, those are detecting changes in the internal environment inside the body. Like, for example, detecting the blood sugar level, detecting my blood pressure, detecting the sodium concentration in my blood, the blood calcium levels, and so on. So all those are internal sensations: the degree of stretch of my stomach, the degree of stretch of my bronchi, and so on. So all those are going to be changes taking place inside the body. So we consider the receptors responsible to detect them are my interoceptors or visceroceptors. How about my muscle, tendons, ligaments, joints? Are those going to be considered external or internal? So you see, if I'm pulling, if I'm changing the position of my arm, I'm applying more stretch on my joint, I'm applying more stretch on the tendon, different degrees of muscle contractions that can be detected, and according to which I'm able to recognize the position of my limbs. Would I consider this as something from outside or something from inside? So we decided it's confusing. So we decided to give it another category, and this is going to be the proprioceptors. And again, proprioceptors, those are the receptors detecting stretch of the muscles, tendons, ligaments, joints, and connective tissue. So again, according to the location, receptors are going to be classified into interoceptors, exteroceptors, and proprioceptors. We also classify the receptors according to the degree of their complexity into complex receptors and simple receptors. Complex receptors, those are like the receptors of the special senses, like in the hearing. We've seen the receptor is called the organ of Corti, and if you remember, the organ of Corti, or the spinal organ, it was located in the scala media of the cochlea. And if you remember, it was formed of hair cells, and those hair cells did have stereocilia, and the stereocilia were attached to a gelatinous membrane. We call this the pectorial membrane, and their ability to detect the sound is going to be determined by whether or not the sound waves will be able to penetrate through the scala media, causing the vibration of the pectorial membrane, And as I move the pectorial membrane, the kinking that is taking place to the cilia of the hair cells is what causes the opening and closure of the channels, causing the cells here to create depolarizations and hyperpolarizations that are going to be conducted through the nerve fibers to be conducted to your brain for you to be able to hear the sound. If you remember, like in detecting another special sense is the dynamic equilibrium. If you remember, the dynamic equilibrium is going to be detected by a receptor located inside the ampulla of the semicircular canals in the internal ear. This is called the crista ampullaris. And the crista ampullaris was formed again by hair cells, and those cells have stereocilia, and the cilia of the hair cells were attached to a cup-shaped gelatinous structure. We call it the cupula. And whenever I will be rotating the fluid, if I'm accelerating, it's going to be moving in the opposite direction to the rotational movement. So if I'm rotating in this direction, the fluid is moving the opposite direction, so the cupula are going to be kinked and moving in the opposite direction as a result of the movement of the endolymph. And this will create the depolarizations of the hair cells that will be conducted to my brain for me to be able to recognize that I am rotating in this specific direction. And the opposite will take place if I am decelerating. If I'm decelerating in the same direction, I'm slowing down in the same direction. The fluid, on the other hand, is going to be moving in the same direction as my movement. So it's going to be moving in the same direction like this, kinking the cupula in the same direction. And according to that, the hair cells going to be creating different signals that will be conducted to my brain. So my brain will be able to tell, yes, I'm now decelerating in this direction. So you see, those are complex receptors that we use to detect special senses. Same for vision, equilibrium, smell, and taste. Compared to the simple receptors for general sensations, those are the ones that are detecting touch, stretch, vibration, temperature, and they are formed of nerve endings. That's it. So they don't have the hair cells, they don't have the stereocilia, they don't have the cupulas, they don't have the pectorial membrane. They are just free nerve endings. Those free nerve endings might be encapsulated, means they are surrounded by a capsule, or they might be free. And we call the free ones, those are unencapsulated. They are not capsulated. Or another name, naked nerve fibers, nerve endings. So again, we classify the receptors according to the degree of complexity into either complex receptors or simple receptors. Complex receptors, those are the receptors detecting special sensations, vision, hearing, equilibrium, smell, taste. Simple receptors, those are for general sensation, and they are detecting tactile sensation like the touch, pressure, stretch, vibration, temperature, pain, and muscle sense. Those again are either encapsulated or unencapsulated. Can you answer this question here? Let me know your response. The PNS has two major divisions, which are what? What are the two major divisions of the peripheral nervous system? Classifies the nerves in the peripheral nervous system to either what or and what? Sensory and motor. Sensory and motor. Sensory and motor. Moving on to the first part of the simple receptors. Those are the unencapsulated dendritic endings. Those are like the thermoreceptors. And we have two types of thermoreceptors in the skin. We have the cold receptors, which are gonna be operating and sending impulses at 10 to 40 degrees Celsius. And they are located in the superficial dermis. Compared to the heat receptors, they operate between 32 and 48 degrees Celsius, and they are located in the deep dermis. So what if I am exposed to a temperature lower than 10 degrees Celsius? Would I still be feeling more cold or wet? What do you think? Or is it the same? So 10 degrees Celsius and 0, for example, degrees Celsius. Am I gonna feel the same in those two situations? What do you think? Would I feel more cold? But you see on here, the cold receptors will operate between 10 degrees Celsius and 40. So how can I feel colder if those already, all the receptors are gonna be activated at 10 degrees Celsius? How can I feel colder? Actually, you don't feel colder. What you feel is an extra sensation that is added to the cold, which is pain. All right. So it's not colder sensation. It's cold, but accompanying the cold, you feel some pain. Those receptors gonna be activated because extra low temperatures that you get exposed to, this is gonna cause a breakdown of some tissues, and as a result, you're gonna have some pain sensations, some pain sensation detected by another type of receptors, which are the nociceptors. For the in-class activity questions, we don't have any in-class activity questions for today's class. We don't have any in-class activity questions for today's class. All right, so don't worry about. So all the questions that we're gonna be discussing are just, that's why I didn't give a number for the previous question. All right, so we don't have any in-class activity questions today. All right, so another type of unencapsulated dendritic endings, those are the nociceptors, which are again responding to pain-causing sensations. Those are the ones that will be sending pain sensation to your brain. Light touch receptors, those are like the Merkel discs, the hair follicle receptors, and those are located, as you remember, in the skin. If you remember, hair follicle receptors, those were the free nerve endings that were surrounding the hair follicle in the skin. And if you remember, the hair was helping you having better touch sensation. So you are able to detect if an insect is moving close to your skin, as it's going to be causing the vibration of the hair, and this vibration of the hair shaft is going to be transmitted down to the hair follicle and will be, as a result, detected by the hair follicle receptors, and I will be sending out the signal to my brain. Next. The erector pileal muscle, it's the muscle on here that was attaching the hair follicle and was contracting in response to fear, cold, and it was resulting in erection of the hair shaft. All right, but the hair follicle receptors, those were the free nerve endings that we've seen surrounding the hair follicle, and they are going to be sending information about the state of the vibration and movement of the shaft of the hair. And this tells me whether there is something that moves on my skin or something. So it helps with light touch sensation. Exactly. Encapsulated dendritic endings, those are the nerve endings that are surrounded by a capsule. Those are like the Meissner's corpuscles that are going to be responsible to detect discriminative touch. What's discriminative touch? It's your ability to detect 2 points touching your skin as 2 separate points. So if you have a pin or 2 pins and you touch your fingertip with the 2 pins, would you feel 1 or 2 points touching your skin? You're touching your skin of your fingertip with 2 pins, so you're gonna feel 2 pins. They are very close to one another. But if you did the same in the skin of your back, keeping a very small distance between the 2 pins, try it today and tell me how many points of touch would you feel on your skin. Actually, you're gonna feel just 1. You're gonna feel just 1 point touching your skin, not 2. Although you've got 2 pins in your hand and you're touching your skin with those 2 pins. Why? Because in the fingertips, you've got much more Meissner's corpuscles responsible for discriminative touch. And this is how you're gonna be able to have better sensation with your fingertips compared to the skin of your back or the skin of your arm. So if you're touching the garment of a dress, for example, you touch it with your fingertips because this is where you're gonna get better sensation compared to the skin of your forearm or arm. All right. And this explains why, if you remember, in the brain, you have a much larger brain representation to the fingers. Much greater representation. Why? Because I've got much more receptors that are sending much more signals to my brain. So I need a much greater area in the brain to receive those signals from those receptors of my fingertips. Pacinial corpuscles, those are going to be responsible to detect deep touch, deep pressure and vibration. And deep pressure is really important. So for example, if you put your hand in your pocket, would you be able to tell what's in your pocket just by touching it, by applying pressure on it? So if you have your key in your pocket and you put your hand in your pocket and you are holding the key in your pocket, would you tell that this is the key in your pocket? Or would you get it confused with a lollipop, for example? Or a flash drive? Would you confuse your key with a flash drive? No, you would be able to tell that this is a key. How did you know that this is a key and not something else? Simply by applying pressure. And when you apply pressure, what your brain is doing is going to be detecting the degree of pressure at each point that you're touching, and it will be sending all those impulses to your brain, and your brain would be forming a virtual 3D model of what you are detecting according to the degree of pressure applied on your skin. So the receptors here responsible for detecting the deep pressure and vibrations, this will help you to tell how the key looks like. It's going to be the pacinial corpuscles. Another type of mechanoreceptors, which is going to be an encapsulated dendritic end, is going to be the Ruffini endings, and the Ruffini endings are going to be responsible for deep continuous pressure. They are detecting deep continuous pressure, and actually we use the Ruffini endings here to send the signals to substitute the pain sensation. So if you cut yourself, for example, what you're going to do, you will find yourself to relieve the pain, you are applying continuous pressure. Why? Because you're not usually exposed to this kind of sensation from the Ruffini endings. So once you apply pressure, your brain will start to substitute the pain sensation detected by the pain receptors and starts to perceive the deep pressure sensation coming from the Ruffini endings, because it's not used to get this sensation. And the same concept when we perform, for example, something like the acupuncture. Acupuncture is relieving the pain because it allows the pacinial corpuscles to detect the vibrations, and your brain will substitute the pain sensation with the vibration sensation. So you feel less pain. You're substituting an annoying sensation by a much less annoying sensation. All right, this is the whole concept of the acupuncture on here. You are trying to substitute the pain sensation by another less annoying sensation. In this case of the acupuncture is going to be by activating the pacinial corpuscles that are detecting the vibration. Muscle spindle, which are detecting the muscle stretch. So Golgi tendon organs, they are detecting the degree of stretch of the tendons, and the joint kinesthetic receptors, those are detecting the degree of stretch applied to the articular capsule or the joint capsule. If you remember, what did we classify those receptors as? Are those exteroceptors, interoceptors, or proprioceptors? Remember, the receptors detecting degree of stretch of the muscles, tendons, joint capsules, those are not extero, not interoceptors. We classified them, if you remember, as proprioceptors. Proprioceptors. All right, so can you tell me here, what do you think? If someone pinches you, what type of receptor is being activated? What is the type of receptors? What's the type of receptors that will be detecting pain-causing stimuli? Those are my nociceptors. 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 Sensory integration, its survival depends upon both sensation and the perception of the sensation, as we discussed the example on here, if you remember, when I have put those figures on your screen. I remember I asked you, can you see what I'm drawing? And you told me, yes, we can see, but you didn't know what was the meaning of what you see on here. And I told you, yes, you have sensation, but you don't have perception. What I mean by this, you can see it, but you can't understand. You can't give it an interpretation, or you can give it a meaning. All right, so do you remember what was this? Anybody? Yeah, my name, it was Mina here. So as you've created a memory that an owl is an M, a leaf is an I, water is an N, bird is an A. So you've created a memory of what you've seen. So now when you see it another time, what happens? You integrate the new sensation, which is vision, with the memory. So by the visual association cortex. So now I can interpret, now I have perception of the new stimulus. So whenever I see it again, I can connect what I see with what I've already learned. And this will be applied to everything that you learn, every new thing that you see, every new sound. This will be applied to everything. You're able to perceive the sensation because you've had some experience with it before. And you gonna be connecting the sensation with your memory. And this gives you an interpretation, an ability to interpret this stimulus. So if this was the very first time to see red color and nobody did teach you that this is red, would you know that what you see is red? What do you think? If nobody has ever told you that this color is red, would you tell that this is a red color when you see it for the first time? You won't. Can you see it? Yes, you can see it, but you wouldn't perceive it as the word that we've given to it as red. So we don't know what we actually call this that we see. All right, this is the interpretation of the sensation. So neural signal integration in the sensory system. So I'm sending out signals from my joint, from my muscles, from my skin, and all those are going to be traveling up to be sorted, edited in my thalamus. Remember, the thalamus is your vice president. It's going to be determining which type of sensations should I be focusing on right now? Which ones I should just neglect for now? And according to that, I'm sending out the most important sensations to my cerebral cortex, the primary somatosensory cortex, remember, that was located posterior to the central sulcus in the post-central gyrus. This is the primary somatosensory cortex. So once I receive the signal, now I can feel what I'm touching, feel the vibration, know the state of my joint. So is my joint is flexed, extended, abducted, adducted, rotated. I can detect the degree of stretch of the muscles, tendons, ligaments, and the joint capsule. So I can tell, I have conscious awareness of the presence of the stimulus. But you don't need only those sensations to know the state of your joint, the pain, the cold, the warmth. You need all those sensations also to be integrated with other brain centers that will allow subconscious level of regulation, like the one that is taking place in the cerebellum. So what was the function of the cerebellum, if you remember? The subconscious coordination between my skeletal muscles. And this subconscious coordination of my skeletal muscles will allow me to maintain a normal body balance during movement. So I can move, I can walk, I can run. So when you are walking or running, you don't think, what is the degree of contraction that I should be performing to maintain my body balance? You don't think of this. This takes place subconsciously. You don't say, for example, I want to, this is a degree of touch I'm applying on my foot. So I don't have a good pressure on the ground. So I should be contracting the gluteus maximus on the right side, for example, to stabilize my joint. You don't do this. So for example, you say, I've bent my head to the right, so I need to extend my leg to the left to perform the movement, to maintain my body balance. You don't do this. All those sensations are going to be delivered to your cerebellum, and the cerebellum is the one who will be determining the degree of contraction pattern of the contraction of your skeletal muscles to maintain your body balance. All right. And if a person got a problem with the cerebellum, he will have an uncoordinated muscle movement. He needs to be checking out the position of his foot on the ground. He needs to extend his arms to maintain his body balance, to have a better control of his body balance while he's moving. Called this is a cerebellar ataxia. So you see, all those sensations need to go to subconscious brain areas like the cerebellum, and the cerebellum is going to use all the sensations to perform a coordination of the muscle movements to maintain your body balance. All right, so let me show you here an example of ataxia. It's not an unconscious, so it's not, I'm not performing a movement which is unconscious. So it's not like a tremor, no, it's an uncoordination of the muscles while I'm moving. So I decided to move, I decided to walk, but while I walk, I'm not able to maintain my body balance. So let me show you on here. All right, so this doctor is showing the Ataxic Gate on here. So he gives you an impression. So you see he's setting his feet apart to get a better ability to maintain his body balance, to not fall while he's walking. So each time he's trying to maintain his balance consciously. Each time he's moving, it's a continuous trial to maintain his body balance during movement. And he will be, rather than adjusting everything subconsciously, he's going to be trying to do it on his own. All right. Does this make sense? Does this answer your question here, Theodore? All right. All right, so structure of the nerves that are moving in and out of my central nervous system. If you remember, a nerve is a cord-like organ of the peripheral nervous system, which is formed of bundles of axons, nerve fibers. Those bundles of nerve fibers might be either myelinated or unmyelinated. The nerve fibers are not going to be present on their own, but they are going to be surrounded by connective tissues that builds up the structure of the whole nerve. So if you see here an axon, each axon is going to be surrounded by a layer of connective tissue. We call this layer of connective tissue, it's my endoneurium. The same concept like what we've seen in the muscle. If you remember, around each muscle fiber, we've seen the endomysium. Here, we've got the endoneurium. It's surrounding the axons. Surrounding the bundle of axons, we call this is my perineurium. Surrounding the bundle, it's perineurium. Surrounding the whole nerve from outside, we have another layer of connective tissue surrounding all those bundles of axons to form the nerve. We call this is my epineurium. So we've got three different types of connective tissues that are going to be integrated with the axons to build up my nerves. We have the endoneurium, perineurium, and epineurium. We classify the nerves according to the type of signals they are conducting. If they are conducting sensory nerve impulses, they are called the sensory nerves. If they are conducting motor impulses from the CNS to the effector organs, muscles, or glands, those are the efferent or the motor nerves. And some nerves are going to be carrying both types of signals. So I can carry both afferent and efferent signals, sensory and motor. So we call those are mixed nerves. So again, we have three types of nerves according to the type of signals they are conducting, either sensory, pure motor, or they are mixed nerves. We also classify the nerves according to where are they getting their origin from. If they are getting their origin from the brain, we call those are the cranial nerves. If they are getting their origin from the spinal cord, those are my spinal nerves. If you remember, what was the ganglion? Ganglia are the collection of cell bodies outside of the CNS. If you remember, cell bodies outside of the CNS, it's what we call a ganglion. And the collection of axons outside of the CNS in the peripheral nervous system is going to be called a nerve. Cell bodies in the CNS, we call this as a nucleus. And the collection of axons in the CNS, inside the brain and spinal cord, we call those are, if you remember, tracts. So the ganglion is the site where the neuron cell bodies are going to be associated with nerves, or in other words, they are in the peripheral nervous system. And we have two major types on here. We have got the dorsal root ganglia. Those are the sensory somatic receptors. Those are the sensory receptor, the sensory somatic cell bodies of the neurons. We've got the autonomic ganglia, and those are motor visceral nerve cells. Moving on to the cranial nerves. Cranial nerves, we've got 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Most of them are mixed nerves. What I mean by a mixed nerve, again, I contain nerve fibers that are conducting sensory impulses and other nerve fibers that are conducting motor impulses. Two pairs are purely sensory. Those are cranial nerve number 1 and cranial nerve number 2. Those are my optic nerve and olfactory nerve. Olfactory nerve is the one that conducts smell sensation. It's purely sensory. Optic nerve is the one that conducts visual sensation or vision. And again, it's purely sensory. Those cranial nerves are all going to be connected to structures of the head and neck, except for cranial nerve number 10, or the vagus nerve. All right, cranial nerve number 10 or vagus nerve is the one that will go to innervate organs outside of the head and neck. All right, so remember, what happens in vagus didn't stay in vagus in here. Right, it goes outside of the brain, of the head and neck. All right, this is for you to remember again which nerve, which cranial nerve is supplying organs outside of the head and neck. Again, one more time, it's my vagus nerve. Vagus nerve. So looking on here at this diagram, see, it's a type of diagrams that you can see on your quiz. Again, this chapter is not going to be part of your lecture exam 4 or the lab exam. So we've got cranial nerve number 1 on here. This is my olfactory nerve. Those are the olfactory bulbs that will be receiving the fibers carrying smell sensation from the nasal mucosa. Cranial nerve number 2, those are going to be my optic nerves that will fuse together and will form the optic chiasm. We call this connection between the right and left optic nerves. It's optic chiasm. And then when it splits again, we call those are my optic tracts. So we've got optic nerves, they fuse together, we call this fusion between the two, it's the optic chiasm. And then when they split again, but there will be an exchange of the fibers when they fuse. This is not something that we're focusing on in this class, but we call them, after they got split from one another, we call them the optic tracts. Moving on to cranial nerve number 3. This is my oculomotor nerve, and from its name, what do you think is going to be an action of this nerve? It's going to be the oculo eye movement, oculomotor. Another nerve fiber or nerves that is another cranial nerve that's going to be allowing the movement of the eye. It's going to be the trochlear nerve, which is cranial nerve number 4. Next, coming from the pons, is going to be cranial nerve number 5, 6, and cranial nerve number 7. So what are those cranial nerves on here that you see? Those are the trigeminal nerve, abducens nerve, and the facial nerve. Those are cranial nerve number 5, 6, and 7. And again, they are originating from my pons. Moving down from the medulla, we've got the nerves that will be conducting the hearing sensation, as well as the dynamic and static equilibrium sensation. This is my vestibulo-cochlear nerve or cranial nerve number 8. Cranial nerve number 5 is going to be sending out impulses to the tongue. Number 9, yes, did I get confused? Glossopharyngeal nerve is a cranial nerve number 9. This is going to be sending out the impulses to the tongue and pharynx. That's why we call it glossopharyngeal nerve. Vagus nerve is going to be traveling to the outside, sending out the innervation to organs outside of the head and neck. It's my vagus nerve. Cranial nerve number 11, this is going to be my accessory nerve. And cranial nerve number 12 on here, this is going to be my hypoglossal nerve. So again, we're looking here at the different cranial nerves. Those are my olfactory nerve, cranial nerve number 1, optic nerve, cranial nerve number 2, oculomotor 3, trochlear 4, trigeminal 5, abducens 6, facial nerve is number 7, 8, vestibulocochlear nerve, 9, glossopharyngeal, 10, vagus nerve, 11, accessory nerve, and 12 is going to be my hypoglossal nerves. Those are the 12 pairs of cranial nerves that we've got. Again, most of them are mixed nerves. Some of them are purely motor, and the two prominent nerves that are purely sensory, those are my cranial nerve number 1 and 2, olfactory nerve and optic nerve. All right. So we don't need to know all the details related to the cranial nerves. This is a topic that usually takes few classes to discuss just the cranial nerves, the details related to the cranial nerves and the injuries of the cranial nerves. All right, so what we just need to know are their names and numbers. All right, for again, the sake of the chapter 30 quiz. All right, but we do not cover the details of all those cranial nerves in this course. All right. Any question? Any question? Vestibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve number 8. Cranial nerve number 8 is a vestibulocochlear nerve, which is going to be sending out the signals from the cochlea and the vestibule. And if you remember the cochlea, this was the organ responsible to detect hearing, and the vestibule was detecting the static equilibrium. And if you remember, static equilibrium was your ability to know the position of your head in space. So those sensations sent from the internal ear or the inner ear from the different organs of the internal ear. And remember, we've got 3 different organs in the internal ear. Those are the cochlea, vestibule, and the semicircular canals. All those sensory impulses created in those 3 organs are going to be conducted towards my brain through the vestibulocochlear nerve or cranial nerve number 8. So all those are cranial nerves. They are coming from the brain. All those are cranial nerves. All right. We didn't discuss the spinal nerves yet. All right. Yes. C8. Yes. All right. We're gonna discuss this after break. Yes. So as you mentioned, as we've studied, we've got vertebrae C1 to C7. So how come I have spinal nerves which go from C1 to C8? So you see on here. So I've got one extra nerve because from underneath each of them, you've got one. All right, so you see on here. I want to show you. So if this is C1, is a vertebra. So you've got C1 nerve. This is C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, and T1, just above T1 is going to be C8. All right, so we've got 7 cervical vertebrae, but 8 cervical nerves. All right, we're going to discuss this when we come back from break in more details. All right, any questions before we go for a break? Any questions before we go for a break? All right, so we'll see you in 10. Thank you. All right, welcome back. So we're starting now a new set of nerves. Those are the nerves that are getting their origin from the spinal cord. We have 31 pairs of spinal nerves. All of them are mixed nerves. If you remember what's a mixed nerve means it carries nerve fibers that are carrying sensory impulses and other nerve fibers that are carrying motor impulses. According to the point of issue from the spinal cord, we're going to be naming those spinal nerves. We have 8 cervical nerves from C1 to C8, 12 thoracic nerves from T1 to T12, 5 lumbar, L1 to L5, 5 sacral nerves from S1 to S5, and 1 coccygeal nerve, which is C0. If you remember, spinal cord did have this H-shaped gray matter. And if you remember, this H-shaped gray matter had a dorsal horn and a ventral horn. And in the thoracic region, we've got the lateral horn. From the dorsal horn, this is where I receive the sensory impulses. So I'm connected to the dorsal root of the spinal nerve. Those nerve fibers here are sending the sensory impulses to the spinal cord. And the ventral root of the spinal cord is the one that will be sending out the motor impulses, which can be connected to the ventral root of the spinal nerve. Those together, the spinal dorsal root and the spinal nerve ventral root will fuse together and will form my spinal nerve. This is what we call the spinal nerve on here. The spinal nerve gonna be divided into a branch that is traveling backwards. This is called the dorsal ramus, and a branch that will be moving forward. This is gonna be my ventral ramus. So again, looking here at the structure of the spinal nerves. Spinal nerve has a dorsal root, a ventral root. When they fuse together, they will form a spinal nerve. Each spinal nerve is going to be forming 2 branches, a ventral and a dorsal ramus. So ventral root contain the motor or efferent fibers that will be innervating the skeletal muscles. Dorsal root's gonna contain the sensory nerve fibers that conduct the impulses from the peripheral receptors to the spinal cord. Both the dorsal and ventral roots will unite to form the spinal nerve. Each spinal nerve has many branches. Most spinal nerves will form connections or networks of nerves. We call those are plexuses. A plexus is a network between all the different nerves. Branch nerve networks, those are the cervical plexus, brachial plexus, lumbar plexus, and the sacral plexus. Only the ventral rami of the spinal nerves are the ones that are going to be sharing in the formation of those plexuses. So looking here at the cervical plexus, you see cervical plexus is going to be formed by the ventral rami of spinal nerves from C1 to C5, and resulting from this network, we're going to be getting the final nerves that would be sending down the innervation to the muscles of the neck and the diaphragm. The phrenic nerve on here is this nerve that's going to be sending out the motor impulses to the diaphragm, responsible for the contraction of the diaphragm and respiration. Brachial plexus, if you see on here, it's going to be formed by C4 to T1. You start first by the roots. Those roots will form 3 segments on here. We call those fused roots are my trunks. We have the upper, middle, and lower trunks. Trunks will give out branches that will fuse together, forming 3 cords. And the branches from the cords are what we're going to call the nerves. So if we are looking here at the order by which the brachial plexus is going to be arranged, we start first by roots, next is going to be trunks, next is going to be cords, and finally is going to be my nerves. Again, the brachial plexus is going to be supplying or innervating the muscles of the arm and the skin of the arm. This includes the median nerve, the ulnar nerve, the lateral pectoral, medial pectoral nerves, and so on. So we don't need to memorize all the nerves from each of the plexuses, but we need to remember here for the brachial plexus, the order of arrangement, which starts by roots, then trunks, then cords, then my nerves. Lumbar plexus is going to be formed by the ventral rami from L1 to L5, and the nerves that are coming from the lumbar plexus will be responsible to innervate the muscles of the abdomen and the thigh. Sacral plexus is going to be formed by the ventral rami from L4 to the coccygeal nerve. So L4, L5, S1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and coccygeal nerve, which is going to be C0. The nerves are going to be responsible to innervate the buttocks, the lower limb, and pelvic structures. See, all the nerves that are innervating the leg on here are actually originating from the sacral nerve. A very famous nerve that gets irritated is the sciatic nerve, greater sciatic nerve. When irritated, when inflamed, it causes burning sensation and pain in all the lower limb, all the way down to the leg and foot. Moving on to our last section of this chapter, which is the reflexes. And reflexes are going to be categorized into two main types. Those are the intrinsic reflexes or inborn reflexes. Those are very basic reflexes, involuntary and predictable motor responses to a stimulus. So for example, if you touch a hot surface, you're going to be pulling your hand away, regardless if you are a child or if you are an adult. This is a predictable reflex that you are born with. You close your eyes when you hear a loud sound, for example. This is a reflex. You didn't learn to do this. It's an inborn or intrinsic reflex. Those are rapid reflexes, they are involuntary, and they are predictable responses. Learned or acquired reflexes are resulting from practice and repetition, like driving skills. So if all of a sudden somebody is crossing the street in front of you while you're driving, you're gonna hit the brakes. And this is something that you have acquired by practice. It's not something that you're born with. So if you've got a child and you let him drive, his driving skills are not that effective because it needs a lot of practice in order to create those acquired reflexes. What is the structure of the reflex arc? What are the components of a reflex arc? First, I need to have a receptor that allows me to detect the change of the environment, stimulus. And this stimulus is going to be detected by the receptor and sent through my afferent nerve fiber, sensory neuron. And this sensory neuron is going to be conducting the signal to the spinal cord to travel to the dorsal horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord. And in the spinal cord, this is where I've got the integration of the sensory neuron and another motor neuron. And this is going to be by the interneuron. So you've got an interneuron that connects the sensory nerve cell to the motor nerve cell. And as a result, you're going to be causing the excitation of a motor nerve cell that is located in the ventral horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord. And this motor neuron is going to be sending out an action potential and electrical impulse for your effector organ. In this case, is going to be the muscle to contract. So if, for example, I did touch a hot surface with my skin, so I have thermoreceptors that are detecting temperature. I have those receptors that are detecting pain. Those signals are going to be sent through sensory neurons to my spinal cord. Integration will take place within the spinal cord. I don't have to send out the signal all the way to my brain to conduct the reflex. Reflexes will be taken care of at the spinal cord level. Interneuron will allow the connection between the nerve cell and the motor cell. Motor cells, in response to the stimulation of the interneuron, will send out electrical signal to the muscle for you to contract. And as you contract your muscles, you're going to be pulling your hand away from this hot surface. Looking at an example here, which is the stretch reflex. So if a person has a stretch of his skeletal muscle, remember the receptor inside the skeletal muscles that is detecting the degree of stretch of a muscle, this is what we call the muscle spindle. This stretch sensation is going to be conducted to your spinal cord and will be integrated with two motor neurons. A motor neuron that innervates the stretched muscle, allowing it to contract. So you're going to be sending an excitatory impulse to this skeletal muscle. So the stretch of the muscles that got stretched, it contracts in response to the stretch. And in the same time, you're going to be performing a relaxation of the antagonist muscle. So for example, if I have stretch of my quadriceps, so the quadriceps needs to contract, but in the same time, I need to relax the hamstring muscles for me to perform the action. Because if you contracted the two antagonist muscles, one is performing extension of the leg, for example, and one is performing flexion of the leg. If you contracted both of them in the same time, what's going to happen? There will be no movement resulting. So what you're going to need to do is you need to contract the muscles that got stretched, but in the same time, you need to relax the antagonist muscles. Example here is when you tap on the tendon, on the patellar ligament on here. When I tap on the patellar ligament, what happens? I'm stretching the quadriceps muscle. And once the quadriceps muscle got stretched, it's going to be detecting this stretch through the muscle spindle. And the stretch sensation is going to be sent to your spinal cord through the dorsal root of the gray matter, of the dorsal root of the spinal nerve, to get integrated in the spinal cord, passing through the dorsal horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord. Again, two integrations here that will be taking place. An integration with an excitatory nerve cell that will be delivering excitatory impulses to my quadriceps for the quadriceps to contract, but at the same time, I want to inhibit the contraction of my hamstring muscles, the flexors. So what's going to be the net result when I tap on the patellar ligament? The quadriceps contracts and the hamstring muscles will relax. So as a result, you're going to see that the leg is going to be performing some degree of extension. Golgi tendon reflex. Golgi tendon reflex is the same concept, but here I am not just performing stretch of the quadriceps. That's why I will be contracting. Rather, I am causing the stretch of the Golgi tendon organ. Here, I'm performing extension or stretch of the tendon itself, not the actual muscle. So this excitatory signal is going to be integrated with two neurons within the spinal cord, one that allows an excitatory impulse to be created in my hamstring muscles, and one inhibitory impulse that will be created in my quadriceps muscle. So what's going to happen if you are pulling my forearm? How do you think I would be responding here? I will contract the antagonist muscle and relax the agonist. So when I have a stretch of the tendon, it's the opposite of the stretch of the muscle. This is what's going to happen on here. When I stretch the tendon, the muscle, which tendon has been stretched in order to preserve the tendons. Think of it logically. So if I have a muscle like this, and I'm telling you I'm applying tension on the tendon on here, logically, would you be, if you're applying tension on the tendon, would you be logically contracting the muscle or relaxing the muscle? One or two. What do you think? Let me know in the chat box. So if you're contracting the muscle, would you actually be worsening the condition or not? If you're contracting the muscle, you are performing extra tension on the tendon. So this tendon might rupture. So if you're stretching the tendon, it's so logical that you're gonna be not contracting the muscle of this tendon, but you do what? You are relaxing the muscle. So what's gonna happen again? If I'm stretching the tendon, the muscle which tendon got stretched is gonna be relaxing. And the opposing muscle, the antagonist muscle, is the one that's gonna be contracting. And this is the exact opposite of when I stretch the muscle itself. When I stretch the muscle itself, the stretched muscle gonna be contracting, and the opposing muscle is gonna be the one which gonna be relaxed. Our third example of reflexes on here is gonna be your flexor crossed extensor reflex. Flexor crossed extensor reflex. So try to imagine we're done. You're done with your course this semester. So you went to the beach and you are sitting on here. Let me draw this. I'm fishing, sitting on the ocean and putting my leg down like this. In the water. All right, so, and all of a sudden, a shark here came and starts to pull my leg. So what do you think is going to be your response as a reflex? So if somebody is pulling your leg, would you let it go or would you pull in the opposite direction? Pull back. You're going to pull back. This one on here, on this side. And how about the other side? Find yourself that you are performing actually an extension. You're kicking here. So you're gonna be pulling back the one that is pulled, and you're gonna be extending the one which is not. You pull one, so try to imagine, you're pulling out my forearm. You're grasping from my forearm like this, and you're pulling towards you. So what will I do as reflex? I will pull back on this side that you're pulling, and I will extend the other side. So here we call this reflex, it's flexor crossed extension. Flexion crossed extension. So you pull apart the side that is pulled, you're gonna pull it back, and on the other side you're gonna push. So you pull the pulled arm, but you push by the other side. You pull, if you're pulling my left arm like this, I will be pulling back. In the same time, I am pushing you away with the opposing side. So we call this is a flexor crossed extension. So you've got a flexion here, where you've got a person pulling you, and on the other side, you are performing an extension to push him away. All right, so we call this is again a flexor crossed extension. So this stimulus on here, it's not going to be integrated with only two, it's going to be actually integrated with 4 motor neurons. 2 on the same side and 2 on the opposing side. All right, so again, we call this as a flexor crossed extensor reflex. Questions? Questions? All right, so this completes our discussion of chapter 13 today. Again, we don't have any in-class activity questions that you need to complete for today's session. All right, so a quick overview of what you need to be completing in this brief period that we still have remaining for this semester. So please make sure you have completed lecture exam for 4 chapter quizzes, which are chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16. Lecture exam 4 again is only going to be covering 14, 15, and 16, not 13. Also, please make sure that you have completed the lab exam 4, which covers the central nervous system and the special senses. Also, please make sure that you've completed all the visible body courseware lab assignments. And you have submitted the in-class activity questions on Canvas. Please submit all the in-class activities as one document. Only one document that needs to be uploaded to Canvas to be submitted as your in-class activity. Again, please make sure you've completed all the 4 visible body lab assignment that you don't have access to through Canvas, but you need to access them through the visible body courseware. Please do not email me any of this on Canvas. You need to submit it on Canvas, not email me on Canvas for the in-class activity. Is this what you're asking about? No, you can submit. You can submit it anytime, starting from today until the due date. Let me check on here. So you see, this is your canvas on here. This is the modules. You have a tab, a separate module that states in class activity, virtual class activities and pub quizzes. And the way on here for you to be able to submit the assignment is by uploading the document. So you upload the documents that you've created throughout the semester, and it's gonna be you're gonna be submitting it on here. You have a separate module just for the virtual class activities.